Today I'm speaking with legend of Australian's theatre, screen, cinema and television, Simon Burke. He also produces his own works and is busy in the industry behind the scenes as well. Super excited to talk to Simon. He's coming here to the Canberra Theatre Centre as part of the Wharf Revue. It's not the first time he's been in it, and I can't wait to hear his insights on what it is to be an actor. So Simon, you've been acting since you were a young child, and seemingly acting for a living as a professional since you're a teenager. Have you ever thought that life might have taken you somewhere else?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess I think about it from time to time. I guess because, I guess when I was 12, I was acting professionally, so I kind of thought of it as a profession pretty early. Mm-hmm. I never really considered anything else seriously as a young person. I was pretty academic at school, so I often, sometimes I kind of miss the sort of intellectual rigor of what we do generally, although, when it comes along, I sort of rise to it. Perhaps that's probably why I moved a little into kind of producing my own stuff and becoming involved on the other side of the camera a little later and a little sort of more recently. And but I think generally, the die was cast pretty early.
Sure, but it's interesting to hear you talk about the intellectual rigors and academic stuff, because you were head of the Actors Equity Agency?
Yes, that's right.
For a good decade there. I mean, I imagine that's quite a demanding type of environment.
Yeah, look, you're absolutely right. And I think a lot of that that part of me was served in that position. Yeah, I was federal president of ACT for 10 years, and 2 years before that as vice president. And during that time, served as vice president of the International Federation of Actors, which was basically a kind of amazing organisation, which is guilds of like 180 performers guilds around the world. So yeah, in terms of, I guess I ran a board for that amount of time and strategized and negotiated. You are an honorary. It is an honorary position, but sometimes it felt like a full-time position.
Yeah, okay.
It was pretty. There was some pretty. The nice thing is, I got to go to Canberra a lot. I got to, lobby on behalf of other performers, and I really enjoyed coming to Canberra with producers, with writers and directors, and when we would come as an industry, and I found all that really, really quite sort of interesting and motivating. Yeah.
What about it was it a different type of thing that you hadn't really done before, or?
Well, I think that as a performer, you really spend both your career and your both sort of on stage and off stage, and in character and out of character. The life of a performer is a very kind of subjective thing. You kind of tend to think of it from your point of view or from your character's point of view. And in many senses, when you're kind of talking on behalf of your industry or on behalf of your union or your fellow colleagues, you gain some kind of objectivity from it. And I found this is what I really enjoyed about being about producing my own stuff. You kind of get this real sense of the overall view, and I think it makes you a better actor because you kind of work out. It's not one of our greatest traits to see as actors, to see where we fit in the story, or where we fit in a group of people, and I think that's a really important tool to have as a performer. So I think it's almost like the other side of your brain.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm glad you brought that up, actually, because it's so interesting to me to think of what so much of a life spent acting must do for how it must just define so many of your emotional experiences, your personal developments, like even just sort of your triumphs and adversities. If you're having those while simultaneously spending large periods of your time trying to inhabit other characters or I guess just spending time with your peers where your role is defined by how you're doing someone else's life in a way. It must be really difficult to keep sight of yourself. Does that resonate at all?
Yeah, it does, I think. I mean, I think there's a whole lot more kind of candor about that in the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of research being done about the mental well-being,
the toll of
wellness,
the craft.
Wellness of performance, which is really good. There's, I guess that's happening, all over the world.
Broader social trend,
on a social trend, but I mean, it's particularly important with performance. I think it's an extremely tough business that you really never, just when you think there are no surprises left and every dreadful thing has happened to you, then they'll find another way to kind of to disappoint you. But you kind of, it's funny. You kind of take that on, and I certainly took it on fairly early, and you learn to roll with the punches. I guess because the highs and the adrenalines of performing or of your situation when things are going really fantastically, kind of should hopefully paste over the times where things, you're not feeling so great. But it is. I mean, I think I've been, because I saw it so much as a job and I didn't train. I think I'm pretty good at leaving the character at the stage door and just going and living my life. It's just kind of, when I'm working, I don't really find that whatever role I'm playing impinges a huge amount on my personal life. It does sometimes unavoidable. Mm-hmm. But I think that's, it often depends on the people you're working with, and often performers are just, there's always a great kind of gallows mentality and sort of like gallows humor and stuff. Performers are lots of fun to hang out with, and often the most emotionally demanding roles, you'll find you're working with people who just make you laugh your head off the whole time when you're not on stage. So that kind of laughter is a good medicine for that sort of stuff.
Sure. I mean, it's interesting that I guess you could speculate that they'd be correlated, but it's interesting to hear that because, you often get that with people who work in close confines with really distressing stuff, do have, I guess, the type of humour and closeness that, most people don't really have to worry about. I'm just thinking off the top of my head of nurses at emergency departments or soldiers or things like that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not equating the perils or the difficulties of a profession with a soldier or a nurse, but I mean, there is that.
But there's still the emotional
kind of correlation.
Yeah, there's the emotional weathering from it, I'm sure. You mentioned that you never trained. I read in one of your interviews that you said, I never trained because I kept working. I never wanted my early success to be a free ticket so that you always make sure that you're ready to start over again. What does that mean to start over? And can you give some examples of when you've done that?
Well, I think that, I suppose right back, when I finished year 12, I had some, quite a bit of success as a child actor, and I was contemplating auditioning for NIDA, and just around the time I was doing my HSC, and at that time I got, asked to audition for John Bell for a small role in Romeo and Juliet that he was about to do, and Mel Gibson was actually playing Romeo in, oddly enough. And so I auditioned for that, this tiny role, and got that. And so I put the idea of training at drama school on hold for a year while I did that. And it just kind of... That's not to say I didn't miss the idea of training, or I didn't feel having had a lack of training. But I guess what you don't realise, at that age when you're doing, and I then started working kind of non-stop for about at least 10 years, kind of almost non-stop. And you realise that every single thing that you do professionally, whether it's good or bad, whether you're good or bad in it, is basically training it. And, when you're working with good people, when you're working with bad people, you kind of pick up. It's just fun. I mean, I see it more as a trade rather than a profession. It's trade. You can go to sort of, you can go to tech and learn how to become a plumber, or you can kind of just become a plumber's apprentice. And I think that's sort of how I saw it. And but I would always send, having done that, and they got to a point, I guess when I was 25, 26, where I stopped looking at, with great interest at the graduates, at who was graduating from NIDA, who was the same age as me. I looked at that sort of. There was really only NIDA, but a year for thinking, oh my God, well, they've trained and I haven't. Yeah. There's so much going to be ahead of me. And then, you get to a point where you go, well, I'm kind of here now. I'm sort of, there's not much point worrying about not having trained. And then, that was the stage. In fact, it was exactly that age when I started auditioning for musicals, never having sung before. And I kind of thought, I've done television, I've done theatre. I think I can sing in the shower. Why don't I try? And that's what I auditioned for Marius for Les Mis and ended up getting it. And, so like, I guess I'd throw myself challenges like that, not for the sake of it, but because I thought, well, why not try this? I'd like to do that. And if I can do it, if someone's going to give me the opportunity to do it. So then I basically learned how to do 8 shows a week of singing through the experience of having to do it rather than sort of training as a singer. And then, I'm not sure if that would happen these days, but
well, it's certainly not nothing that you were able to do it. I mean, Marius and Les Mis, they're not walk up start.
It's not the easiest role. I didn't start with the easiest one, I have to say, but yeah.
Do you now at this stage, having you talk about that where you're seeing the NIDA graduates as your contemporaries, do you look back and think that there was something to be gained from that experience? Because I myself am an artist, I'm a musician, and I didn't go through the schools, but I sometimes think it would be nice to have, the classical mastery or something. But I think at the same time, like it's hard to imagine that, that the schooling could even come close to simulating what you were doing with yourself in that same time period. Well,
it's an interesting question, and it's sort of timely because it's almost at the full circle at the moment. In fact, while I'm in Canberra, I'm going to be flying up a couple of times during the day to be the industry liaison with this year's third year graduates, who I've worked with a little bit. I did this kind of informally last year, where I'd worked a little bit with last year's third year, and it came to graduation day, and someone kind of contacted me, on Facebook and said, I'm not really sure about this age, and I haven't got anything. Could you give me some advice? And so that grew into this kind of position that they've asked me to fill this year, which is just to kind of basically hang with them like a couple of weeks ago and in a couple of weeks, and then kind of be there to sort of talk them through if they need it or if they want it. As someone who isn't on staff, but is someone who is very connected to the industry, who's in the industry, to kind of, just advise them. And I think there's absolutely every. I think if you want to be a performer these days, it would be pretty hard not to do it. I mean, lots of people don't, but it's always a slightly harder road not to go to drama school, I think, or slightly more. It's not harder. It's less sort of. It's more of a map you have to make for yourself.
Yeah.
But I think that well, certainly the institution of NIDA, I've been a little bit in the last 12 months. I think it prepares them extremely well, and also the fact that they are having, they're sort of forcing themselves to, not forcing themselves, they're making sure that the students have a lot of contact with people who aren't on staff who are in the profession, which I think is really great. They've got a really sort of great mentoring system there too. I think they buddy up people with performers who are working, and yeah, that's good. I think it's great.
When you're working with these third years, like what is it that you think makes for a good actor?
Look, I don't think you really can. I mean, look, there are some people that you see them on stage and they have a spark, and it's a kind of I don't know, it's a kind of collision of sort of truth and vulnerability and some kind of, that terrible cliche, je ne sais quoi. But I don't know. I think it's very hard to tell, and I actually use this example. I worked with a performer earlier in the year who was 6 years out of NIDA, had graduated, one of the kind of supposed kind of lights of the year, and didn't get offered a first or second tier agent. Mm-hmm. So started working in the business, and then didn't really have much success. Then landed a role in a soapy, and was on that for 4 years, and has like a couple 100,000 Instagram followers, and then kind of did what I did, like reinvented themselves and went back to playing an understudy in a musical, and then played the lead role on a show with me. And so 6 years later, this person is using the skills that they acquired 6 years ago at the theatre skills they'd acquired 6 years ago, but hadn't had a chance to use. And they are now, absolutely placed front and center to have a fantastic career from this point onwards. But it's been 6 years of kind of not in the wilderness, but kind of not really knowing where it goes. I just don't think you can ever predict how someone's career is going to take off, and sometimes how people's careers are just going to stall and not go anywhere. And I often say to young performers, because it happened to me, I think once you are a young adult, if you're going to be around as an actor all your life, the first 10 years, it really honestly doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter if you do soap for 5 years and then don't work for 2 years, then go overseas and, backpack and then come back and do independent theatre. I mean, all these experiences, life experiences and work experiences, are the kind of building blocks of the person that you become and the actor you become. So, I've seen a lot of the one person in that year that people go, that's the one. Mm-hmm. And often that is the person that is the one in that year, and often that is the person that doesn't work. You just can never tell.
I'm sure it's true of all arts careers, but particularly acting. It seems to be for those who aren't in that type of world, so volatile. If you're a plumber, you know what you need to do to get the job and to have a career. But with acting, that 6 year path that you just described kind of seems if you have a low risk appetite and you like to have a degree of certainty in your life, that sounds like a nightmare.
Oh, total utter nightmare, and it's a really difficult story to tell the kids that I'm working with at the moment, the third year graduates who are about to graduate. That's a hard story for them to hear, because they've just spent 3 years slogging their guts out and working in cafes to get to a point where they're to say that that might be their career path, and that, in my opinion, it's a very justified and valid one.
And it's a good one.
Probably something they don't want to hear, but it's something that just might happen. Look, if you're risk averse, you don't want to go anywhere near this business.
Yeah, I guess
because there is no guarantee of anything. Even I've been working since I was 12 years old, and there's no guarantee of anything. No matter what highs or lows you reach, you just do not know what's around the corner.
It sounds like they're lucky to have you on board as a mentor, because you've, of course, not just had since you're 12 acting, but you've had just roles that I imagine you would never even, that you wouldn't have even heard of them as an option, going on to play school, and Marius in Les Mis, that's another one, and directing and producing your own show as well. Like, how have you fallen into Wharf Revue? Because that's, of course, what brings you to Fair Canberra.
How
Have you fallen into the Wharf Revue? Like, when did that cross your radar?
Well, this will actually be my third time in Canberra with the Wharf Revue, but I guess, but only my second legitimate time. I was there last year, but I was called in at last notice. Drew Forsyth had to go to hospital and was out of the show for 8 weeks. And I got a call, I think it was on a Thursday, from my agent in Sydney, and they said, "Can you take over from Drew for 8 weeks?" And I said, "Oh, yeah, sure. I've done Wharf Revue before. It'd be a bit tricky." I said, "Wait, how many weeks rehearsal will I have?" And they said, "You've got Monday and Tuesday, and you'll be on Wednesday."
No.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
And I was like, it was absolute. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, but I'm so glad I did it. I mean, I had done the show. I did the show in 2013 from scratch and had a great time. And funnily enough, when they rang me this time last year to do the takeover, I knew that I was doing the Wharf Revue this year because it was booked a long time in advance. So I just thought, it's one of those kind of tasks you set yourself. I thought, well, look, it's a review. What's the worst thing can happen? I can just turn to someone and say, "Hey, what's my line?"
Yeah.
I mean, I've had to. In that position, you could turn to the audience and say, "Look, hey guys, I've had 2 days rehearsal. I've got no idea what happens next. People will laugh, and I'll just tell you." I mean, it's like it's the kind of gig, really.
If there's an audience that would forgive it, that would be.
And I guess it's that freedom that you have as a performer that drew me back to doing the show again, and the fact that I knew that they knew I was going to be doing it so far in advance. So this year they've kind of specifically written characters for me, and so they've written for my voice for what they think they might enjoy me doing. So it's kind of really lovely to be written for. So yeah, I'm also pretty much of a political tragic. So I'm devastated that when we're in Canberra, the other times there that they come down, it's just unfortunate that Parliament's not sitting while we're down here.
It is sitting. It is sitting for a portion of it, actually. I only know because I'm trying to get an event going after one of the nights where I interview an MP on stage after the show and see what they.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Okay.
So hopefully that does happen, but it should be sitting. I don't know. At least the Senate will be sitting for some period of the run.
Oh right. No. Well, we're generally hosted by Tony Burke.
Right.
During for a lunch and stuff, which is lots of fun, and we get a chance to go and sit in the the audience. What do you call it? The gallery.
Yeah, it is an audience, isn't it? Yeah.
The audience
for the theatre.
And look, there's nothing like doing Wharf Revue in Canberra because it's almost they're probably like 2% of the audience aren't involved in government in some way. So it's like it's just the most tailor-made audience, and the audiences in Sydney are pretty fantastic, but I have to say they don't compare to the Canberra ones for this particular show anyway.
Do you enjoy the satire itself if you're a political tragic? Like, is that something you get excited about? Seeing things throughout the year that you might want to jump on?
Yes and no. I mean, because I'm not one of the writers, and they were rightfully, absolutely, Philip and Drew and Jonathan, very much, the writing is very much their domain, so there's not much scope for us to contribute, although we certainly have suggestions here and there. But I do find like this mob of characters that I'm playing this year is a fairly tall order, and the sort of chameleon thing of I think I go from Alan Jones to Mark Latham with a full costume and wig change in about 25 seconds.
Oh, that's fun.
So it's kind of it requires a lot of elasticity as a performer, a lot of kind of just jumping in and doing it. So I find I find it really challenging and satisfying because when you get it right, it feels like you really feel like you get it right. And what I've noticed this time about the performing style, and I think it's because they write it so, because it's so tailor-made. It's satire, it's broad comedy, obviously, because satire involves a deal of broad comedy, but also you kind of running through the performing style at the same time is sort of hyper realism. So you're being quite broad on the one hand, but at the same time you're honing that certain look that Scott Morrison does, or that kind of intonation of Alan Jones, or so like you. So while you're trying to land the humour in a kind of as kind of hearty, kind of generous way as possible, you're also kind of your brain just keeps developing the smallness of the characters, which is really kind of an interesting dynamic.
Mm-hmm. And you're described in the show bio as the triple threat that's been called in. Do you have a wide range of talents that you have to employ for the show, or do you want to save it for the audiences? They'll be there anyway.
When I'm at triple, I always call because I always call myself a 2.5 threat because I am the worst dancer as well. But it pretty well calls upon almost everything I've got, I think. And it's only a 90-minute show, but it's a high intensity thing, and look, it drags. I think comedy is also wonderful because the longer you do it, the more you find that you've got to bear it down or pare it down, or just tweaking it. It's like being in a chemistry lab. You're just constantly experimenting, and
you have to do it to know.
You might have perfected a laugh on one particular line, and then you'll just keep perfecting it, and you'll just go that 1 millimetre to the right, and you'll lose it that night. And it's fantastic because you go, okay, you go that 1 millimetre back to the right, to the left, and it's a science. I mean, that is one of the few things about doing what I do that is. That is kind of, it's not risk averse, but it is sort of something that is kind of tangible. You can feel. So no matter how many magic is created on stage, but it is a science as well, which is good.
It sounds extraordinarily fun. Do you have? I guess you've done so many roles now. They must, your feelings about those roles must coincide with how you're feeling in life, or the surrounding factors of the shows. But do you find that you have standout roles and experiences that you remember more fondly than any others?
Look, when I was talking about you just never know what's around the corner. Completely out of the blue, 10 years ago, I got invited to go to London and play Captain on Trap in Sound of Music at the London Palladium, and it just completely upended my life and catapulted me to suddenly in the middle of the West End, and it was a beautiful production and a great cast, and I mean that. And then, funnily enough, just the beginning of the year, I directed that show for Askham Girls' School.
Are they taking it to the West End?
No, where I just kind of I managed to bring the love and the sort of heart of that production that I felt from that show to kind of give that back to the kids that were doing it. These kind of literally, year 10 to 12 kids. And, that was great.
That's wonderful.
I did a show called Three Furies about 15 years ago, which was where I played it was a Stephen Sewell play, playing Francis Bacon, the artist. And that was probably the most taxing thing I've ever done. It was just a kind of just a cool, just ripping your heart out sort of thing. And I think I would say my most enjoyable experience of the last few years has been a show I did at the Griffin Theatre called Declan Green, who's a wonderful Australian playwright, wrote a play which I didn't, although I didn't know him at all, he wrote it for me, the character for me. It was a play called The Homosexuals, and it was a kind of it was transferring a French fast to Sydney in 2017, and it was the most revolting, narcissistic Lothario character I've ever played in my life, and it was just, it was brilliant. And it was an exploration of binary, non-binaries, kind of sexual politics in Australia in the now, and it was just a delight to play. So, and as a result, I ended up the director Lee Lewis, who she and I worked incredibly well together, and as a result, I've ended up as sort of the artist member on the Griffin board, and that's been a really rewarding experience, kind of being on, just being part of it again, like in the Actors Equity experience of sort of looking after a company as a whole rather than thinking of it as what it can do for you. It's always a really interesting thing to do.
It sounds like you've really put yourself in the position to have, the full gamut of experiences, and it's a great reflection of any character. But another one is the things that the people say about you that have no stake in you hearing them. But a colleague in my office just before, when I told them I was setting up this interview, they said, "Oh, Simon Burke, he's the consummate gentleman and an absolute professional. I've never heard a bad word about him, and every encounter I've had has been completely delightful." And I think if you can do that on top of having an incredible breadth of work, you're doing something well.
Oh, that's very lovely to hear and surprising, and
it's a high compliment. It's not an effusive person that said it either.
That's you, mate. My dad. That's lovely to hear. Look, I think. I don't know. I think that I hope that's part of my personality, but I think that if anything's trained me in that direction, I think that maybe learning my craft on the job rather than training because you get to see very quickly what's good behaviour, what's acceptable behaviour, what's unacceptable behaviour, and there is a good deal of unacceptable behaviour, in our industry as much as anywhere else. But it's so easy. I mean, if you've got a great job, it's so easy and you enjoy your job. It's so easy to be nice to other people. It's just. I don't want to sound like Pollyanna, but it's not rocket science to kind of just not be a dick.
Wonderful. Well, I look forward to seeing you play with the lines of what it is to be a dick. What a note
to end on, Chris.
Yeah. No, I think it leads in perfectly because you're playing with it perfectly on as part of the Wharf Revue, which is at the Canberra Theatre Centre from the 12th to the 23rd of November. And listeners can get their tickets at canberratheatrecentre.com.au. Thanks so much for chatting with me today, Simon. It's been a total pleasure.
Thanks for having me, and come and see it, everyone. It's a good one, I think.
All right, rush to get your tickets. Bye, Simon.
Thanks.